If you ever imagined a car from the 1950s that looked like it came from the future, the 1953 Studebaker Commander Starliner would be it. Just look at it. Low-slung, sleek, elegant, like it rolled out of a sci-fi design sketch. And yet, despite its stunning looks, this car ended up being one of Studebaker's biggest failures. Why did such a groundbreaking design, crafted by some of the world's top stylists, fail to propel the company forward? In this video, we're going to uncover the lesser-known story behind the 1953 Studebaker, the technical ambition, the unforgivable missteps, and how one of the most beautiful coupes in history became a symbol of a company on the edge of decline. And who knows, you might just fall in love with it too, even if only to admire it from afar. To understand why Studebaker poured everything it had into the 1953 model, we have to rewind the clock a little. The 1950s were the golden age of the American auto industry. Giants like Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler ruled the roads. But in a small corner of the market, one independent automaker, Studebaker, was still holding its ground. From the late 1940s through 1952, it was the best-selling independent car maker in the US. In some years, it even ranked fourth in national sales, right behind the big three. Studebaker didn't have a massive budget or a sprawling dealer network, but it had one powerful weapon: being different. They knew that to survive among giants, they had to be quicker, more creative, more daring. And that's exactly why they kept pushing out new tech, bold designs, and modern engines. In the eyes of car enthusiasts, Studebaker was the brand that dared to take risks, and sometimes that's all you need to make history. But bold design doesn't happen by accident. Studebaker knew that to build a car unlike anything seen before, they needed designers who weren't afraid to break the rules. Enter Raymond Loewy, a legendary figure in industrial design who led the project. But he didn't work alone. Loewy brought together a team of design geniuses, names that would go on to shape the future of American automobiles. The key figure behind the 1953 model was Bob Bourke. He led the studio's efforts, and to find the best design, he and fellow designer Bob Cotto did something radical. They split the clay model in half, each sculpting one side of the car. Creative competition, all in the name of beauty. Bourke insisted on using the longer wheelbase from the Studebaker Land Cruiser. That decision gave the coupe a sleek, elongated look, the perfect foundation for the low, long, wide design philosophy. It also allowed the rear seats to sit ahead of the axle, improving both style and comfort. At first, this was just supposed to be a show car, but everything about it was too right, too beautiful, too bold. And so the company said, "No, this needs to be the real thing." And just like that, a concept car became a production car, carrying with it the dream of a team that dared to think differently. And then, in 1953, the new Studebaker was born. But this wasn't just a car. It was a design manifesto, a bold jab at the boxy, milk carton-shaped sedans that ruled the roads at the time. To put it into perspective, the average car back then stood about 63 inches tall. The Studebaker, just 56.3 inches. That's more than 7 inches lower. A coupe so sleek, so low, it didn't just roll. It seemed to glide. It was the first time Americans saw a car that looked like speed itself, even when parked. Up front, a split grille that mimicked jet engine intakes, directly inspired by the Lockheed Commander aircraft. But it wasn't just cool. It was iconic. Many believe Pontiac borrowed this exact idea when they introduced their famous split grille in the late 50s. But it wasn't just the nose. Every inch of this car was sculpture. The rear deck tapered elegantly, the hood sat incredibly low, and the taillights were set apart from the bumper, creating a sense of balance and flow rarely seen back then. Imagine yourself as an American driver in 1953, gliding past a sea of boxy sedans in this beauty. Then, you'd truly understand what it meant to drive against the tide. You'd truly understand what it meant to drive against the tide. But what truly made the Studebaker special wasn't just the overall silhouette. It was the tiny details, those subtle touches, that allowed its design to stand the test of time. They say greatness is found in the details, and in the case of the Studebaker, every small touch contributed to its lasting legend. Start with the sculpted side coves, subtle, elegant, and just enough to catch the eye. These dips along the body weren't flashy, but they added character and would later become a design hallmark on sports cars like the Corvette. Then there's the V-shaped emblem, housing either an 8 for V8 models or an S for 6-cylinder versions. It might seem like a minor touch, but it was bold enough that Mercedes actually protested, claiming the tri-point design looked too much like their own star. And don't miss the wheel covers. Cone-shaped, clean, and minimalist, at first glance, they seem purely functional. But this very design would go on to inspire AMC and other automakers throughout the 1970s. Even the smallest details, a sculpted line, a badge, or a wheel cover, reflected Studebaker's forward-thinking spirit. And to bring that bold design to life, they had to make changes from the inside out, specifically under the hood. With a body that looked like a sleek European coupe, most people expected a high-performance monster beneath the surface. But no, instead, there was a modest 232 cubic inch V8, nearly 100 cubes smaller than Cadillac's iconic 331 V8. It made just 120 horsepower. Sounds underwhelming? Maybe. But remember, this was 1953, and Studebaker's engineering team followed a philosophy of efficiency, economy, modernity, not brute force. In fact, this engine was a major step forward compared to their outdated 245 cubic inch inline-six. It was lighter, smoother, thriftier, and 20% more powerful. With a conservative 7:1 compression ratio, it had room to grow if needed. The problem was, the market was entering the horsepower craze. Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, they were all ramping up displacement and muscle. Studebaker played it safe and got left behind. But that safe decision would come back to haunt them, especially when paired with a far bigger issue, the car's structural integrity. Studebaker's engineers probably thought, "We've got a revolutionary design, a new, lightweight, fuel-efficient engine. Everything's on track." But none of that mattered when the car's backbone, its frame, simply couldn't support the very design they created. Instead of using a strong perimeter frame like the big automakers, Studebaker opted for a cowbelly frame, lighter but far too flexible. Once the V8 was installed, the body sagged. Engineers had to wedge rubber shims, basically old tire rubber, between the frame and body just to compensate. This caused the car to twist and groan over bumps. Doors creaked so much, engineers joked, "The doors are talking to you." Funny on paper, but to buyers, it was a clear sign of poor quality. Worse still, cheap door latches that could pop open when crossing railroad tracks. Why? A chief engineer, lacking mechanical background, chose a latch that cost 15 cents less. He was later fired for taking kickbacks from the supplier. a car once expected to be a symbol of engineering progress. Yet it lost consumer trust over things as simple as a weak frame, loose door latches, and squeaks over potholes. And then, the consequences didn't just appear in the workshop, they showed up in the sales charts. In 1953, despite praise for its design, Studebaker sold only 170,000 cars across its lineup. Not terrible, but far below expectations after such a major investment. And the following year, disaster struck. 1954, just 81,000 cars sold. A downhill spiral with no brakes. Consumer confidence collapsed. They heard the rumors. Doors popping open, weak frames, sloppy assembly, but worse, they felt it. On the road, where Studebakers rattled, flexed, and just didn't feel solid. Even though the styling remained admired, Studebaker's reputation for engineering took a hit. And that's fatal for a small automaker trying to compete with giants like Ford and Chevrolet. There was a strange irony. The hardtop coupes were still loved for their beauty, but everything else, especially the four-door sedans, with their shorter frames and awkward shapes, only dragged the brand image down further. The Studebaker didn't fail because it was ugly. It failed because it promised too much and couldn't keep its word. But look a little closer, and you'll see. Not every Studebaker from that year shared the same fate. In truth, the coupes, especially hardtop models like the Commander Starliner, are still revered by collectors and car lovers today. Their beauty hasn't faded one bit. Long bodies, flowing roof lines, and perfectly balanced proportions, all thanks to the extended 120.5-inch wheelbase that gave them the presence of a concept car made real. On the other hand, the four-door sedans were dealt a rough hand. Built on the shorter 116.5-inch wheelbase, they looked stubbier, less refined, especially around the rear quarter and C-pillar. Same name, yes, but a very different experience. That contrast created two destinies. The coupe became a design icon. The sedan faded into archival obscurity. Ask any vintage car enthusiast today about the Studebaker, and 99% will mention the Starliner coupe. The sedan, they'll probably just recall that it existed. But if you're among the 1%, would you want to bring a piece of that legend home to your own garage? The best part? That dream is still within reach. Unlike many classic cars that fetch six-figure price tags, a 1953 Studebaker, especially the coupe, is surprisingly attainable. A fully restored hardtop coupe can be yours for around $30,000, the price of a new mid-range SUV. And if you're flexible, a solid pillared coupe can still be found for about $20,000, drivable, presentable, and full of charm. That said, come into it as an admirer, not a racer. This isn't a performance car. Its frame is soft, the ride is far from refined, and the V8 offers modest output. But what you're really buying is a design that was years ahead of its time. And maybe that's the real lasting value this car brings. The Studebaker wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fastest, the strongest, or the best-selling car. But maybe that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. In an industry where most automakers followed the crowd, Studebaker dared to turn the other way. They built a coupe that looked like the future, and more importantly, they had the courage to bring that vision to life. Even though it failed commercially, the Studebaker earned its place in history, not through numbers, but through the spirit of standing apart. This car is a reminder that sometimes beauty and boldness don't win right away, but they endure as icons. So what about you? What do you think of the 1953 Studebaker? Is it a forgotten masterpiece, or just a dream that never came true? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more journeys into forgotten legends and daring machines. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next ride down memory lane.